what you have been told. He wrote me a letter. By this time, he was in Geneva as the ambassador. So when I was sent to the United Kingdom, he wrote me a letter and said, High Commissioner, I want to tell you that your period of tourism in foreign affairs has just ended. Many years later, when I was appointed his permanent secretary, because at this time when I was appointed permanent secretary for foreign affairs, he was serving almost his last term in Washington, D.C. So he wrote me another letter, and he said, you should now prepare for quick retirement, because where you are now, you could exit any minute. I was just 42. And by the way, sometimes you feel quite young. When I went into the civil service from the University of Nairobi, the newspaper in this country announced that she's posted to the UK, having just graduated from the University of Nairobi. I didn't study at the University of Nairobi. I think they were trying to put me down on grounds of age. You will find this a lot where you go. Somebody looks at you and said, she's very young. So I get to the UK, and already there they are saying, and they even said, she's related to the president. We were not related. I come from the middle of nowhere. And sometimes I really find it odd, because even up to now, I find people who think that I may have come from some privileged background. I don't know what they are looking at, but I went, if just for you, so you know, I went to school barefoot. And child of a mother whose my father died before I was 1 year old. So it was never easy, but nevertheless, I have often wondered whether I'm the one who gives the wrong vibes or what. So I get to the UK, and I'm already being told, it was actually this king who was here the other day when he was Prince of Wales, who drew it to my attention that I was the youngest ambassador in town. That should have depressed me. But usually, even then, I knew one thing. You know what you are supposed to do. It doesn't matter whether you are 50 or 30. If you know your subject, that should be enough. So I didn't, when he told me that it was a social gathering, and of course he put it in the most diplomatic terms, I had to go and think, what did he really say? So I went to the Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and I was told, yes, indeed, that is the case. The one next to you in age is the ambassador of Saudi Arabia, and he's 10 years older than you. By this time, I had gone through this thing in headquarters anyway, because I remember an incident when the Egyptian president was coming here. It was 83. So I'm standing at State House because I was all the time taking the notes. Nobody knows my name. I take the notes, I write the letters, I draft the speeches. And on that occasion, the head of public service asked my PS, did you invite the ministers to the official talks? And he said, Jerry, it was Jerry Kireni. And my PS said, Jeff Shamala said, no, Jerry, I forgot. And then Kireni says, that fellow, Koske from your office would know. Could you ask him? So Shamala looked at him and said, Jerry, did you say fellow? She's just here. So Kireni takes a look at me and bursts into laughter. He said, a girl, how old are you? Then he checked himself and said, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing at myself for making the assumption that one, you are an old man, and that you are a man. So Shamala, then he said, how did you learn, where did you learn to write so well? And my generous PS said, she went to school, Jerry, she went to school, she is smart. I was flattered, but Jerry Kireni remained in touch with me, I think, throughout his life, because he always looked me up to see how I was doing, where you are now, and so on. But what I can tell you from that experience of always ending up in the room as the youngest, and sometimes not only the youngest, but the only female in the room, is that you have to have confidence. I was not scared of people. You don't get scared of people if you know what you are doing. and you can just respectfully say, yeah, I'm sorry, sir, but you are wrong. The first time in a meeting, I told the top boss that I'm sorry, Mr. President, but you are wrong. I thought people were going to, I looked at their faces and they were shocked. But he said, no, let her speak. So my own advice on that is that just have confidence so long as you know that what you are saying is correct, and say it properly with respect. So anyway, this London thing, soon I was told there is no woman heading a diplomatic mission. After the Public Service Commission interview, I've already been hired. And I was told, go and see the PS. I don't even know why they sent me there. I get there, and the PS, I had, you know, being an academic, I had sent my CV. I thought he would have read. I had researched and known what he studied. So he tells me, what qualifies you to work here? I said, I beg your pardon, I'm better qualified than you. Didn't you read English and you got a pass at Makerere? Didn't you look at my, I mean, frankly, you should have fired me on the spot. But he was a very nice guy. He apologized and said, yes, of course, I didn't look at your CV. So I said, but it's there. So he looked at it and he said, oh, you are qualified to be here. Then I went to the administration, and I overheard these two guys talking in a language they thought I didn't understand. They said, this one has been given the PhDs now. They are bringing their own people here. And I'm wondering, whose people am I now? I didn't say anything. I went to a friend of one of these guys and I told him what they said. I said, I'm going to beat him up. I said, don't do that. But when I came back the following day, the two people were there and they said, we are very sorry. We were out of line. My message on that is that don't take things to heart sometimes. Try, and especially when you are new in a ministry and you think they don't like you because of the way you look, or somebody has a problem with you because of your ethnic background, or somebody just doesn't like women or something like that. Sometimes they have had a bad day or they have had some bad experiences. Don't let anybody push you out because of their own prejudices. So I stayed. Then I was sent to work in our Kenya mission to Habitat. Someone there asked me, who is your godfather? And I was so angry because in transferring from the university to central government, I was losing 40 shillings a month on my salary. 40 shillings was a lot of money. I was so furious, and I had to work. In those days, the civil service worked even on Saturday. At the university, you rearranged your program and you decided when you wanted to teach what, and had a lot of time in between. So I said to this wonderful lady, if I have a godfather, he must be dead or he's fast asleep. If he's just asleep and you know where he is, please wake him up to come and help me, because I'm working at the lowest possible level for which I qualify, and here you are giving me static. Nevertheless, one overcame that, because soon after I was taken back to headquarters. This time it is because we were stuck as a country with the Organization of African Unity. Kenya had remained chair for nearly 3 years, and the new permanent secretary, looking through the files, decided that I was probably better off at the desk helping with writing and researching and so on. So I went back to headquarters, although the experience in the Habitat office was tremendous, because this is when we did the human settlements conference, 5th Commission of Human Settlements, and it was a very sharp learning curve for me in things multilateral. So I get to foreign affairs for the lowest level for which I qualify. Since you have been there now, and I don't know whether you still do the exams, when I went there in July, 16 of my former students at the University of Nairobi joined me in January, and that became almost my peer group. So I kept track of them, and 3 months later, they sat those exams that had 6 papers. One of them, I think it was Peter Nkuraya, passed all the papers at one sitting. So within 3 months, he was already moving up, because the system was almost automatic. The others had to resit and sit and sit. Because I didn't have to do that exam, mine remained one of promotion on recommendations, because the recommendations had to be done to the Public Service Commission by those supervising every 3 months. So at the end of the year, they would be evaluated. So I got then promoted to undersecretary, and now I panicked because we didn't want to be deputy secretaries. We being in foreign affairs, you could be appointed ambassador from undersecretary. We used to call deputy secretaries deadwood, and we didn't want to be deadwood, because once you get near the PS, they get a bit uncomfortable. So then, as they say, one thing led to another. But let me tell you what the civil service is, and I think that has been mentioned already. And if you ever have time, I don't know how much most of you read, but a former president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo, wrote his memoirs. Just in case you are thinking of looking for them, there are 3 volumes. I think volume 1 is 700 pages in small print. Volume 2 is about 500, and volume 3 is about 600 pages. When you retire, like me, you have time to read those kinds of things. So I was going to read you what he says about the civil service. And he says that in the word, he says, if the British could devise and design a substitute for civil servants, they would have done so. That they had not done so means that civil servants are a necessity. The services of a good crop of committed, disciplined, patriotic, honest, and God-fearing civil servants are indispensable for success of an administration. And I agree with him completely. And here is why. We often, and I think a lot of people run away from the civil service sometimes because they don't see what their work is contributing to. But they also don't understand that cabinet operates on what the civil servants do. For any paper to go to the cabinet, it starts with the desk people, and then the desk people have to pass it through their permanent secretary, who then takes it to the head of public service. I think these days he's the cabinet secretary. I don't know how it exactly works. And then the ministers then come in, the cabinet secretaries come in to present. Once the decisions are taken, they come back the same way for implementation. My first contact with that was during our independence celebrations of 20th anniversary in '63. We invited, the letters were drafted in the Africa division. I was only the number 2 there, but I had been told that the number 1 was not going to be doing the drafting, it was going to be my work. So I was drafting. And I noticed in the files that we did not seem to have formal diplomatic relations with a certain country. Anyway, so I made a note, but we went through the celebrations, and as it turned out, the president of that country, Abtidon of Djibouti, I think there was a misunderstanding with the protocol side. When he was escorted to the airport to go home, as he was going through the guard of honor, the military is playing the music, he stopped in between, walked out, came to his host and said, "My brother, are you chasing me? I'm told by these people when I finish this, I will go home." "I'm not going home. I want to go to your national parks." The confusion, my PS then, Bethwel Kiblagat, who spoke French well, had to run to interpret what this president is telling his host, because he was speaking French, he didn't understand English, the host didn't understand French. So now the confusion of all that was that they couldn't finish the guard of honor, and he came back and it was announced that he's going to tour Kenya. So now Foreign Affairs was in trouble. How did that happen? So we went back to the desk to try and see what to do. Is when now what we had noticed as desk people was brought up. We don't even have formal diplomatic relations with them. And so that was my first cabinet paper that I drafted. I was still a senior assistant secretary. So it goes up to the top, it gets there and goes to cabinet. It was done. This time, my bosses were very nice. They said, now that cabinet has approved, you are allowed to travel with a team to Djibouti for the first time. And it was very rewarding. However, it doesn't always work that way. And I'm sure you have seen it, that you draft something, You take it, they tell you to draft, you do it. You take it to the next one, it goes up, and then they call you in and tell you off. You are foolish. Ulijifundisha kizungu wapi wewe? Who taught you this and that? How can you decide? I went through a whole lot of that until one day I decided, no, I'm going to play this guy's game, the deputy secretary in charge of political affairs. So I went to the files and I studied what he had drafted in his early years. And I took out, it was a message to a country on its Independence Day. I just removed the dates and the name of the country, and I took it to him. And he said, you are very lazy. How do you bring us something? Can't you write English? I'm listening. And then I said, excuse me, sir. I don't like the choice of language here also, but I learned it from the best. I learned it from you. It is here. This is what you wrote a few years ago. He never messed around with me again. He just left me alone to do my work. So you learn, but one thing that I found indispensable is that you have to just read. Read. Not just the newspapers. The newspapers are important, but read. These days you are in a better position because you have the internet. Don't believe everything you get from YouTube, but read, research, find out what is going on. How do other systems work? What do you want to do? And while you might make more money in the private sector, I think there is something to be said about working from your desk, seeing that this thing here is wrong, drafting it, taking it forward, and seeing it implemented in real life. I can stand anywhere and say, look, I initiated that whole thing about civil servants retiring at 60. Took it through cabinet and parliament before I left, and the next group then implemented. There are many things like that I could tell you about. But I found, from the point of view of job satisfaction, that the civil service was where to be, because there is a lot to learn if you actually choose to learn. And how did I learn? When I got to the Habitat office, I didn't know, they say she has come here, she has a PhD, let's see what she can do. I wasn't flaunting that PhD. I had it because I had intended to remain in teaching. It wasn't a statement against anyone else. But here I was, I could see this, and I didn't understand. So the boss sends me some letter and writes there, T&A. So I asked the secretary, Elizabeth Njeri, what is this? She says, it says, take necessary action. I said, but that sounds rude. She says, no, it's the language of the civil service. So I asked her, what kind of necessary action should I do here? She tells me, you get the file, you read what is below, you find out what relates to this, and use that to assess where you want to be. And then the other teachers that I found were the sweepers, and it was also the lower level, the people in human resource. They taught me a lot of things in the civil service. So going back to that introduction, when I came from the UK to be the head of, to be PS Foreign Affairs, it was a very noisy time. That was the 1992 confusion. And one of the drivers who had worked with me in Habitat, Mwai, I'll never forget him, he comes to me and he said, Mama, hii kazi itakwisha tu saa hii, because with elections, we don't think these people will win. But I don't want you to be sent away before you have posted me abroad. I want to go to Zambia. I said, what about me? He says, no, I'll go to Zambia. At least I'll still have a job. If you don't stay, but we hope you stay because you are a civil servant, you are not a politician. But if you go, I'll buy you sugar. Why was he doing this? When we worked together, when I was at the lower level, we had lunch together. It was an easy time for us, even at headquarters. We used to buy maize and eat together with the people who are working there, cleaning the cars and so on. And they are the custodians of what is going on. They'll tell you what is going on. But when I came back, I realized how valuable they were, because nothing would happen in that ministry that I didn't know. And I think partly because I came from the academics, but I think part of it has to do with Dar es Salaam. You need to have a certain dose of humility. Ikiwa wewe ni bwana kubwa, hakuna mtu atakushughulikia. You really have to be one with the people. And Dar es Salaam brought you down that way. By the way, I've often been asked, why was I in Dar es Salaam? Because a lot of people are young. They don't understand what was happening in East Africa. In January of '71, there was a military coup in Uganda. When Idi Amin came in, Tanzania refused to send their students to Uganda. So we were moved out of the University of Nairobi to make space in the halls of residence for the Tanzanian students who couldn't find the courses they needed in Dar. And so we were swept out. There were about 100 of us, most of us actually from the same school. But we were many. It included somebody who became head of public service before me, Faris Kuindwa, Mutula Kilonzo, and a whole lot of people, but mainly the lawyers. So that is why we were in Dar. But what Dar gave me is also what the high school gave me and other schools, other areas, and that is a huge network of people. What you must do is network all the time. If you network together with what you study and your daily experiences, you are actually home and dry, because you get to a level of responsibility where people would sit in a room, the bosses, and say, oh, who can we get to talk to this and so on. So they would say, try that lady, she seems to know, people know her. How do they know me? I took them seriously when I studied with them. You have been told that Jakaya Kikwete was in my year. Yes, he was in my year. But there were other people. Ben Mkapa was the editor of a newspaper, and he used to come to the University of Dar es Salaam every Sunday for ideological classes, which most of us participated in. And that built a whole lot of, from that side. In fact, when I went to Zimbabwe to work as a counselor, the number 2 in the embassy, the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Nathan Shamyarira, a Princeton PhD, had been my professor of public administration at the University of Dar es Salaam. And that made my work very, very easy. And also because he remembered me from the university. People don't remember you if you don't step out. There is a tendency for the girls especially to stay behind, except in Kenya these days at the political level. I find a lot of women think that they have to scream very loudly to be heard. It's never necessary. And you find sometimes the young men are tongue-tied because they are bullied because people are going to shout at them. I always say to that, just be yourself, don't be somebody else. However, my experiences in the public service, much as they had a lot to do with myself and other people, training, what. Most of the success, if that is what we should call it, had to do with working with colleagues. You really have to take your colleagues seriously. Nobody's too small, but don't also be intimidated to a position where you are constantly apologizing for who you are. Somebody would come to me and say, oh, you people, and I think we had a new minister one time who kept insisting that I must be from the well-to-do family. Yeah, it's fine if that's what you feel. I didn't bother with it. If I wasn't, school was the equalizing place. Actually, when I went into Form 1, I sat next to a minister's daughter and big people. Then in older age, a friend of mine, a former American Secretary of State, wrote a book, and she said when she came to talk to the Kenyans during the post-election violence, she could see that people there were the children of the elite. And he said, and they went to the same schools. They started with Uhuru Kenyatta, Raila Odinga, and stopped at Sally Koske, just 3 people. I said, one was the president's son, the other one, the father was vice president. And I was barefoot in the lower parts of Nandi, walking on the stones. If I have now managed to be seen as being a product of the elite, then I have done quite well. I didn't get offended. You must not, what I'm telling you is that you must not put yourself down. It's good to be modest, but don't get put down on grounds of gender either, or be bullied because somebody thinks they went to a better school than you did. That is not necessary. If you know your work and you prepare for your work, then you should be as good as the next person. In the civil service, however, I know a lot of things have changed. We changed the constitution anyway, so some things are there, but you'll always find the bullies. Don't let it get into your heart or your head. Take it on the chin and roll, move on, and tell yourself what we picked long time ago, even this shall come to pass. And move on. Don't let it determine your career. But don't be lazy. Don't get described as that ignorant one, that lazy one. No. You must do your work to the point where when you write, I felt myself that I had achieved some form of satisfaction when in the latter years in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I used to do the minutes for the heads of state when they had meetings for heads of state only for the IGAD countries, and I was the one taking the minutes or writing the statements, the press statements or the communiques. When the president of Uganda said, I won't read it. If Sally has written it, bring, I'll just sign. I know it's fine. I felt very flattered. Of course, my boss, the Kenyan president, was a bit surprised. The others laughed because they knew that he was one of those people who had come from the Dar es Salaam ideological classes with me. But nevertheless, I still believe he wouldn't have said that if he thought I was going to do shoddy work. One time, I think it was the non-aligned summit of '86 in Harare, that Indian Prime Minister Rajiv Gandhi asked my boss, why do you have only one woman in your delegation? So he didn't know what to say. He looked confused, and Gandhi said, I noticed that when all of you leave, she's still here writing the notes. Is she your brain trust? This is the first time I heard that word used. I was flattered. My boss was embarrassed, so I couldn't laugh. And I wasn't sure how many of the politicians appreciated that. But as far as I was concerned, that is all I needed. I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. So you must be, in your team, the most informed person. When you are asked to do something, sometimes you feel, why am I constantly being picked on? No, you are being given the opportunity to be the expert in that. Don't let it pass. Use it, study, get it done properly. And when you write, proofread it. But if you are confident, or even when you are not confident, when you have drafted, give to somebody else to read, and don't get offended if somebody changes what you have written, because it helps when few people work, more people. When I was asked to go to the Africa division, the foreign minister was Robert Ouko. And Robert Ouko had started his work life as a diplomat in the British system. So when I took him the first draft of a speech I had done, he said, oh, did you bring me a copy? I said, yes. So he gave me, I had pen and paper, I had my copy, I had his copy, and a clean copy on the side. And we went through it line per line, and I found myself arguing with him. I said, Mr. Minister, you know you can't use that word. And in those days, we used to carry around a book called the Thesaurus, where you cross-checked not to use the same word. After a while, I understood his style, and he understood what I was doing, and he would say, oh, ask that, he used to call me Nyagot to draft, tell her to bring it here. I developed that with the others also, but I wasn't looking for anything. I was still waiting to leave. And here is what I want to tell you. If you take up a job with the idea that what you want is to make a lot of money, you are going to be very disappointed, because there is never enough money anywhere. If you want to be happy, choose what you want to do. I found the civil service a very happy place to work. And as I said, I started from below, everybody dumping on me, and I just would listen to somebody, take what they are saying seriously, re-examine, and very often I realize, I'm smarter than this guy. I'll just do what I had set up to do. And if they don't like it, they'll ask somebody else to do. But what really I found would help was working with friends, other people. I've noticed something, by the way, with Kenyans. When they go to meetings with other countries, they tend to congregate in one corner as Kenyans. Therefore, you don't make contacts. Therefore, your network is reduced because you have not used the opportunity. Let me give you an example of how it worked for me. When I was working in the United Kingdom, I used to attend the International Coffee Organization meetings. And one of the people there from Rwanda was called Kaberuga. When I went to the Ministry of Higher Education, Science and Technology, this gentleman was the president of the Africa Development Bank. So I went to see him and I said, you know, a lot of our technical schools have been turned into universities, and soon we shall have no technicians to do anything. And he said, do you remember how much food you cooked for us in London? I said, yes, we used to like to eat those days. I was eating also. So he said, okay, how many technical schools do you need? I said 10. They gave us the money. He said, because she did this and that. And again, of course, I worked in areas where, in the end, I used those contacts in the foreign service. But even within the civil service, we had arrangements when I came in that made the civil service work. One of them was the interministerial meetings. You meet somebody from another ministry, they seem to know more or know less or whatever. Use the opportunity to create friendships, because you never know which corner you are going to meet them. I said I think the civil service has changed a little bit, but the civil service used to be where that was the nerve center of government. We knew what is happening, where and at what place. It had regulations also. I'm assuming because you are within the Public Service Commission, they will tell you what those regulations, or maybe you are already told those in your own ministries. But one of them, for example, was there was the preservation of the secret acts. There was also how you keep secrets, what you can say, what you can't say. And one of them I knew was that you could not remove files from the office. Certainly not the secret files or the confidential, and you know the difference between those. So when I was in I think I may have been in agriculture already. I was invited by the Americans to go and have an evening meeting. They had met some of my colleagues. Then they told me that the Minister for Constitutional Affairs had been to see them, and he had his secret files to show them what we were doing. And they asked me, what do you think? I had to think very, very quickly. I was not going to admit to a foreigner that my colleague does not know that you don't take secret files out of the office, and certainly it should be treasonous to show them to a foreigner. So I just said, never mind, my friend, he's a windbag, and he's also a wind vane. So they laughed, and we killed it. It would have ended there, except that conversation came through WikiLeaks by that guy called Julian Assange. And I'm sorry to say, Mutula Kilonzo eventually died before I explained to him that I was actually trying to protect him, because if I had said he did that and it is wrong, it would have looked terrible. So it's me who looked bad, because one of the media houses said she doesn't respect her colleagues. No, it wasn't that. It's just that I was trained in the public sector, and although a perfect lawyer, he did not know that it was wrong to carry secret files out of the office, and worse still, to share them with a foreigner. So you'll find technicalities like that. You need to know them. You should not be faulted. Civil servants are the ones who tell politicians, this is what you don't do, sir. This is what you do. And you have to just be the best in the field. And I think the civil service is a good place to be. I'm not sure that I have not overrun my time yet, but I will leave it to you to ask I wanted to leave some time because I'm sure I cannot tell you about 50 years in half an hour or 1 hour. I want to see whether you want to ask me any questions, whatever they are. If they are personal or official, it doesn't matter. I'm here to answer and to help if I can help. Thank you.
We're bringing you a chair. Yes, because, oh, okay. There are many questions, I realize. I have already received some of them. Guys, please keep the questions coming.
Out of your sharing, we felt that you poured your heart, that in the path that you are taking in public service, we may be sometime come through some of the challenges, but it's wise to understand or not to overcome them, bearing in mind that we have the big picture. People are looking unto us, and whatever we're speaking in a great extent is showing the kind of the public service that Kenyan are having. So we are grateful for such giving this afternoon. Thank you.
So let me first just have one person, if you have any question, before I come to the questions I have received. Any question about what Dr. Sally Kosgei has shared so far, or something you're just curious about? Yes? That was the first hand.
Jambo Daktari. Daktari, we really appreciate the session. Mine is among all the achievements, because I'm a scholar, I love reading the work of Daktari, is her health. She looks amazing. I don't know what is the secret, because there is usually this culture that once a person really works in a certain line, they look this way, they look that way. When you stood there and you said you don't have to sit, I was really touched. And so for me, I really want to know, please share, how have you maintained how you look for all these years? I remember you look the same. There was a time the boss was leaving now after his work. You were receiving him, I think, on his farm. You look exactly the same. So I'm just amazed.
Second question?
Yes, good afternoon, Daktari. Thank you so much for your inspiring story and inspiring experiences. My name is Kamama Sakwa from the State Department for Livestock. And my question is, in your experience, are there times when you faced some ethical dilemmas in terms of balancing competing interests, and how are you able to manage the situation? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's have one lady ask the question before we come to... Oh, Dr. Silva, one lady. We've had two gentlemen so far.
One lady. Before I go, or I can go?
Okay, you already have the mic, so please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam. My experience in the public service, were there some postings you felt were not for your good but punishment? Are there some assignments you felt that you are being given because you are being punished, not really because you are good? Some assignments, some postings in the public service.
Thank you very much. You remember, Dr. Sally has actually spoken about women in public service and women in leadership and women fighting to get to the top. Where are the women? Oh my goodness. I am hoping we will not get another point where we are asking for the women to speak. Yeah, I'm hoping it will not happen again, because I know the women here are very powerful. Yes, please.
My name is Laura Thuo. I am a journalist and information officer. My question is related to how sometimes the perception about young people is usually on a negative light, especially in workspaces. We are always looked at as people with a lot of, like, too much confidence, we're too energetic, too much of something. How are you able to navigate as a young person in such huge spaces based on such perceptions about young people?
Yes, Dr. Sally can respond to those, and then we take the next round.
Let me start with the last one. Age is actually important, and it is true. Sometimes when you speak up, somebody wants to put you down and say, who you are Jewish, she is young. What does she know? This is why I said you have to be the expert in your field, so that somebody putting you down knows very well that you are the most informed person in the room. If you are the most important person in the room, they will still look for you. In my case, I may have been lucky a little bit because, you know, I've mentioned those names. The people I was drafting for were some very, very confident civil servants, like the head of public service at the time, my PS, Shamala, and the ministers who came there were Bobo Ukwa is the one I found there, then Mwangale, and then Onyonka. And I don't think I know many Kenyans who are as well read as Dr. Onyonka was. Those types of people who are confident don't have any need to put anybody down. They actually help you to grow. Every time I sat with Ouko, I learned so many things that I didn't know. Every time I talked with Onyonka, I felt I was learning. And if you are brave and you ask the right questions, and if they ask, sometimes like a question would come up and I'm not there, and I would be called and they say, oh, they said ask Sally, she must know this, she must have read this book. And I even remember 95, I was in Turkey, and the Israeli president at that time, you know they have a president, and asked a question in a meeting where we were, and then I said to him, he was asking about an author, and I said to him, are you asking the one written by Kennedy? And he said yes, and he remembered that every time he saw me taking notes in their meetings, I always was reading a book, because everybody there was so much older. By the way, I got associated so much with people who are much older, 30 years older than I. I was working with them, some were even older than that. Take, for example, my late friend, Charles Njonjo. I spent a lot of time with him, and a lot of people assumed we were the same age. He was exactly 30 years and 2 months older than I, but they assumed we were the same age. But don't worry, you are young now, then you get where I am now, and people tell you, like I was in Voi on Thursday and Friday, I was to confer a doctorate to a government as cabinet secretary, and he said to me, are you not really one of the first people to have gone to Alliance? The school was opened before I was born. I mean, what the hell is that? Now, one day I was so young, now I'm the oldest person on earth. And they kept saying, repeating this, which brings me to you. You look so good, thank you. I'm very flattered. There is nothing I do about it. It's just that I've known for many years, especially for we black people, especially women, black don't crack. It doesn't. Alongside that are certain choices, especially again for women. If you are a chain smoker as a woman, by the time you hit 70, it helps you when you are younger because it keeps off the weight. You get to about 70, it begins to age you. This is what we know. But the good Lord decided we are black. We shouldn't also get old at 35 like white people. They have too many advantages. We should at least hold on to our health. But if you are lucky to have good health and avoid too much substance, that's fine. Somebody asked me a question about what do you do with the time management and the work you have to do. I think back to when I was in the Africa division. My work was in the Africa division, but it soon got to a point where I would be called by the seniors to be told this letter or this thing has to be done for Russia. Russia is in Europe, it's not in Africa, so I find myself drafting, running here and there. I didn't look at it as punishment. I thought it is rather they are accepting that the others are not doing as good a job. And one of the PSs told me, you know, you have a PhD in African history and you have A-level literature. We expect you to write English without stumbling over too many problems. So I saw it as a vote of confidence in me. I was asked several times, because I came in with an academic attitude. When I went to Zimbabwe, I was asked, where do you want to go? And at that time, that was an exciting place. I didn't want to go to London. That's the one I thought was a punishment. It's actually quite funny. I'll go back to that if you remind me. But I was never, sometimes you run into people who are very unfair. Like one assignment I was given 2 months into Ministry of Foreign Affairs was to go to Treasury and find out, list what Kenya has received from external sources for human settlements in 10 years. Human settlements is everything, from housing to water to what. When I got there, the person who was in charge of that division had received a phone call from the person sending me, give her a hard time. So some random man who was listening to our conversation told me, are you not a vetted government officer? I said, yes, I am. He said, but the library is here. This is where all this information is. Here is a chair. Here is a desk. Get that work. This guy, who was actually detailed to give me a hard time, is one of my closest friends today. Because I didn't take it personally. I knew what had happened. I realized he was one of the smart ones, because every time I spoke to him, he really had been in the service longer. He seemed to have a really solid education too. And we became very good friends. In fact, I was calling him last week to tell him a friend of mine is launching a book this Thursday, and I wanted him to come because we have continued to be friends. So I tried, maybe because I really wasn't building a career. It didn't bother me. And I think part of it was that I was supremely confident in myself. I would not be aggressive, but I also could stare down anyone who wanted to put me down. And as I got older, as I became PS, I saw more of this, especially, I'll tell you a joke. One day I'm sitting there, I'm holding a book, I'm reading my book. The president is talking to some ministers here. I never participated. I'm there for a job. When they are talking, I'm not part of their banter. They are politicians, I'm not interested. So then I hear these two talking, and one of them says, Nick, exactly what I was thinking. No, it was the Nick who told Steve, this is exactly what I was thinking. And the Steve says, great minds think alike. And I could not just let that cliche pass. So I looked up I said, oh, and fools seldom differ. Nick Biwott laughed, and he laughed. His colleague, who didn't know that thing, got angry. And of course, the president was sitting there, and he can see this man is angry. So I was sent somebody in the evening to be told, you must not insult my ministers, especially in my presence. Stay away for 2 weeks. So I stayed home for 2 weeks, because as far as the boss was concerned. So when I finally showed up, he said, you insulted my ministers. I said, no, I didn't. Have you never heard of see you later, alligator? The response, he responded, he said, yes, I have heard. They say, in a little while, crocodile. I said, that is exactly what it is. Because but there were always those near misses. Mind you, the fact of being one of the few women in the group, when I came in, as has been said, there was one PS. Margaret Githinji she's a very nice person, and she was very protective of me. But we were from different backgrounds, because here I was, an academic who is prepared to tell you that what you have just said is foolish. But she was the polite one and a real lady, and I wasn't any of those. But nobody also was willing to cut me any slack. I was expected to do like, and I remember one time somebody saying, oh, you know, women are the weaker sex. And the boss, whom we had now trained to accept women as equals, hit the table and said, where did you see women here? These are officers of government. And I said, old man Moy has now become quite educated. We were quite happy about this. So, but as for the division of labor, when I worked at headquarters drafting for everybody, I had little children. So, and we reported at work in Foreign Affairs before 7. I would go home at lunchtime. I would run across to Kencom because the buses worked very well. Take off to Hurlingham, go and feed the smallest baby, go back. And then we finished, office used to end at 4:30 before we went to the 5-day week, when we then worked to 5. Go home, cook, do whatever I needed to do, feed the children, take a shower, put them to bed, go to sleep by 9, wake up at 3, draft, do my housework. By 7, I'm back in the office. When you are young, you have energy like that. But when I went to London, the first government minister who came to visit was the Minister for Environment. His name was Jeremiah Nyaga, and he had known me from the first time I was in Form 1, because his daughter sat next to me, and my brother across in the boys' school was on the same double-decker with his son, the late Joe Nyaga, and he came to the house, and he told me, you know, the children are young. Just make sure that if you are working late, you must have breakfast with them in the morning. If you know you don't have anything serious to do in the evening, be with them for dinner, because children will grow so quickly, you will turn around and they will have gone, and they will have you will have missed them, and they will be somebody else's children. I took it to heart. When I came home, 3 of them were still in primary school, and while I resisted going to London, I actually wanted to come home because I came from the middle of nowhere. I had no uncles or cousins or people in the city who helped me. And later on, I lived by the school tie. People who were at school with me are the ones who helped me. So I wanted my children to have friends in their own country that they could go to. However, I always made sure that I'm the one preparing them to go to school, and as they went to school, I had my own little car, Hyundai, and a personally hired driver. We didn't have these privileges you see here these days, where somebody shows up at your doorstep to have dinner with you, and they have 3 vehicles traveling with them. I had my one official car. They dropped me home and went back to work, to park the car in the office. So I made sure that I was with them when they left. And the office understood that we reported to work, especially when I was in OP, reported to work every day before 6:30. But they knew you can't find her in the office at 5. She has gone home. The system understood that. I set my own standards. If I'm there at 6:30, what is it I have not done by 4:30? If I'm still working by 4:30, as I was working at 6:30, then I must really have hit the point of diminishing returns. So I would go home, and the boss would call, and you would be told she has gone, usimsumbue, muache tu. So I'd go home to attend to my children, to take leisure, to do what, and go to work so that I could gain the energy to sleep properly, because if you don't sleep properly, then you have a problem. So basically, you have to work out what works for you and let them know. Don't sneak around. If I want to go and walk in the afternoon, I do something, I go to the field and I'm walking at 5 o'clock, then I want my boss not to think I'm hardworking because I'm sitting in the office until 7. I know, I'll weigh my work, I know what to do. And I always made sure by being there at 6:30 that by 8, when people come in, there are no pending files on my desk. I've done it. And it's again a question of learning to take quick decisions. I had 3 types of folders: the ones that you could deal with, and the ones that I must think about, and then there was another folder there, a crowd of, I won't do these ones. So I've refused to do them because I don't see the answer. What are you going to do? If I can't see the answer to it, I won't do it. And if somebody asks me, I wrote you this letter, I know exactly where I've put that letter, and I will tell them I've put it in the file of I won't do it. Why won't you do it? Because it is impossible, and I explain. So it's a question of dividing your work and letting people know that what you tell them is what you mean. If you are the type that everybody thinks they can push around, then you are not going to go anywhere. When people know they can bully you, sometimes you have to confront the bullies. Sometimes you just have to hepa waje wapite, let them not even know what you are thinking. But you have to tell yourself, I have one life to live. How am I going to be mistreated by everybody like a stray cat, kicking me around like a stray cat in the streets? You have to stand up for what you believe. But you can't do that if you are uninformed. You have to make sure that you are at the top of your game. I don't know what question I have not answered.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Do not let people bully you, because they are there. Friends, colleagues, superiors, supervisors, yeah, please, just like she said, do not let people bully you. Now, Dr. Sally, you've said in this meeting, I think I was counting maybe more than 3 times, that don't take things to heart. How do you not take things to heart? Because some things are so painful. So how do you not take things to heart?
You sleep over it. Somebody annoys you, go for a walk. I did this more with the media. The British media is aggressive, and sometimes I wake up in the morning and there are 10 newspapers which have reported adversely on Kenya. I would write down my initial remarks, my initial thoughts, then go for a walk. Come back. After 2 hours I read. If I still feel the same, I put it somewhere else. If it goes into the 3rd day, then I know I'm really angry. Then I know what I drafted initially is right. But in dealing with people, you have to understand. I told you, the first one I worked with in UN Habitat is the one who asked me, who is your godfather? I could have taken it seriously, but I knew the history of this woman. She was widowed in the most public manner at age 35, and she had to bring up the children on her own. And I looked at her and I thought, had I been in her situation, I probably would not still be standing. So I decided, I'll cut her some slack. Let her just continue to harass me around a little bit. After a while, she comes and announces to me, after she sent me on a wild goose chase to compile work for 10 years. When I finished and I brought her this huge thing, bound together, properly done, with a proper introduction, she tells me, I didn't realize you are so clever. I said, my sister, how do you think I got a Stanford PhD? What are you talking about? You didn't know I was smart. I am smart. Did you want me to tell you that? She had a sense of humor, so she laughed and said, let me take you to Tintin. And she took me for lunch. And we remained friends until she died. In fact, when I went to education, she wanted me to do some things. Some people you never can win over, and you must accept that not everybody will like you, and some of them will dislike you whatever you do. Accept it. Not everybody will like you. I seemed to have, for example, a problem with a newspaper that kept kicking me around, treating me very badly, until I realized, it's okay. Sometimes you should not work so hard for everyone to like you. Just leave it, let it go. If it is a boss in the office, I've just told you what to do. Even this shall come to pass. Sit it out.
Wow, even this shall come to pass. Let's appreciate Dr. Sally. One of the key factors of this program that we run, over and over is mentorship. And we have risen because of mentorship. I wonder, in your journey, in Lasrel's journey, have you had any mentors? Did you have people you look up to? And are you now mentoring any younger women and men to take after you and lead change?
Let me start with the last one. Who have I mentored? Ask your chairman, the chairman of the Public Service Commission. Ask him. He'll tell you. Mr. Mushiri was my peer, and he didn't know that much about the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He worked with me throughout OP, and the way that mentorship took place was by example. If I was drafting, I let him look at it. If I was doing my cabinet papers, I let him look at them. If I was going to meetings with my friends in the White House, I let him meet up with some of them. And there have been many, partly because of being, actually I'm a trained high school teacher. I trained to teach high school. And among my students is Helen Sambili, and another one called Ambassador Mahmoud, although the late President Kibaki always thought that was a sick joke. He said, no, 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 no. He taught you, you didn't teach him. She taught you, you didn't. He constantly insisted that they were older than I. Of course I'm older than them, which brings me to your point again. I don't know. So anyway, mentorship, yes. They were, in my time, I came from the University of Nairobi to civil service. I already had been teaching there. We even used to teach the diplomacy program with some of my colleagues. I come to the civil service, and people at about the same level are first of all uncomfortable with you. And you've read too many books, they think. But there were some other PhDs in the ministry. And then there were the ambassadors, who are big people. I remember one of them coming to the office at lunchtime. I'm sitting there, and he says to me, what are you doing? These bad secretaries who sit on the boss's chair when the boss is out. So I let him rant on, and then I said, can I help you? He said, well, I'm looking for Dr. Koski. I said, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but that's me. So he stepped back a little bit, came back and said, a young girl. I said, why are you looking for an old woman or an old man? We became friends for life after that. Those are going to happen. But you will find those who are deliberately there to put you down. They might have their own problems, you know. A lot of them have their own problems, and they don't want to see somebody else who is smiling. So you move on, but you don't let them get away with a silly argument. Don't let somebody think you are stupid. No, I've never believed in acting stupid. I'll respond. And also, I found it a little more as a PS, because you get to the level where you are the most informed person in the ministry. And in my case, being a PS for 10 years in one ministry, who is that politician who is going to come there? Kinauko or gone, Onyonka had gone somewhere else, and those people. So it's a new crop of people who look at you, and they can't find, you are ready. You write the briefs they want, you read everything you give them. They are still not happy because they don't understand that the actual foreign minister is the president. And you are caught in between here because they can't complain to the boss, they complain about you. And then they are trying to tell you that, oh, you are lucky, everything was given to you. They don't know where you've come from, where you started. They say, you people who come from rich families. Rich families. I say, yeah, okay, that's fine. What can I do for you, sir? They don't want. They are quarreling. You have to understand that hiyo shida ni yake, si yako. Don't put it in your heart. Don't even try to get them to like you. There are some people who are so weird that if they like you, you should ask yourself, what is wrong with me? Why do you want a buffoon to like you? Just leave them. There are so many nice people in the world. But alongside that, don't take everybody like they are passing. Make good, serious friends whom you are going to meet 10 years later and they are still in your corner. Get people to bat from your corner, which is what we did the whole time. And always laugh. You have to laugh at yourself sometimes and laugh at them too.
Yeah. Now, people know you as an avid reader. You've also talked about reading many books. Which book would you say has impacted you the most?
You know, books. I read a lot of books. It's my life. I just finished reading a huge book on the former. He was chief of staff. He was foreign secretary. He was Finance Secretary James Baker III. He worked for Reagan, for Ford, for the Bush together. It's a huge book, but it's also to do with, the book is called The Man Who Ran Washington. There's a lot. But I tend to read memoirs, and the best one I read in the 90s was written by a former British Foreign Secretary called Lord Carrington, who did not have a university degree. But it's the way they write. But I have read so many books, I don't know. I can go back to my undergraduate supervisor who had a nice book called How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, and we used it as a Bible for a while. Then, because in those days we used to say, if you are not a socialist at 20, you have no soul. If you are still a socialist at 40, you have no head at all. So I think at 40 we acquired our heads. But what keeps me on my own, keeps me in my line, is that I read, and I read all the time. I read all the time.
Wow, and so when are we reading your book?
It's a bad question. I did a draft of that book about 4 or 5 years ago. Then suddenly so many books were coming, and I don't like them. And I just don't want to look like them. So I get this question. A friend of mine is launching a book. We did help him to get it going. But there is this reticence in me that I keep asking myself, who really wants to know about me? Why should I impose my history on anyone? The only part I find interesting is the growing up side, because the first day I went to school, I was nearly expelled. The teacher chased me from class because he came there to teach Swahili. I grew up here in this Nairobi and went home to Pumwani Primary. Was not, my mother didn't think it was good enough, so we went home. So I go to school and this teacher comes and he says, "Gono gono ilibobanda juu ya muti." Ati nini mwalimu? Umanyoko wewe. I said, "What did you say?" Nilikuwa mtoto wa majengo, and this one here doesn't know Swahili and is the Swahili teacher. So I went home to complain, and my mother had to go and intervene, and his father, who was the chief, came to see me and said, "Don't ask him any questions, he doesn't know any Swahili." And he was told not to ask me to answer his questions. So, you know, I just find that early part of my life, or walking every time school started. When I went to Standard 5, I had to go away from home. There was no school there for Standard 5. And the nearest school was 26 kilometers away on foot, to go at the beginning of term and come home at the end of term on foot. So when you tell somebody you went to Alliance, they think these were the privilege. No, that was Kisumu train. The first train was from Eldoret, because they gave us a concession form. Fortunately for me, and I think I would not have gone, fortunately for me, the year I came into Form 1, my brother was also invited in the boys' school. So we went to Eldoret with the concession forms. I'd never been to Eldoret before. And we decided when we get there, we shall tell them we come from Kisumu because we live on the border. Actually, Aldai constituency, which I represented, starts on that Chemelil Road in Kisumu. It's 5 minutes from Kisumu Airport. My home is 35 minutes from Kisumu, actually. So this train, ya Kisumu, had a lot of people because that school was full of people from Nyanza and Western. And we used to sing in the train, 3rd class. It cost 5 shillings and 60 cents for a return ticket. If it was more than that, I think I would not have gone to school. But this idea that that background of mine is what I've always found more interesting, because it, even for me, I find it really funny sometimes when I think of what we had to do. Now, the civil service had its funny parts. And by the way, I did tell you, I was not interested in going to London. It turned out to be the best job I had. And there are a lot of success stories to tell. The most outstanding one was negotiating for the British government to put up that huge library at Moi University, because the university was just being started and the Prime Minister had agreed to come. So there are many things, but I think my story is everybody's story. And I don't want to import such post people on people such a boring. Every time.
Oh my goodness, it's not boring. Okay, we would love to read about your childhood and would love to read about the work you have done in the later years and what you're doing now. We really would love to read that. Okay, if she were to publish today, how many of us will buy the book? And by the way, we have people here who are editors, manuscripts, people, and all that. We can edit your book pro bono. What are you saying? Yeah. We have volunteers as well who will oversee the launch from the planning.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. But you know, you are in a course. If anybody wants me to tell them anything about anything, because obviously in the space we have, I can only tell you some things. There are so many things that survival techniques in the civil service. And I still feel the idea of bringing people from imposing on you up here kills the civil service, although we started it by bringing the 6 people from the dream team. I know what happened because I was the one who had the pen and paper. And if you check the list, 6 were my own schoolmates.
So what advice, what tip, just 1 or 2 tips would you share with these amazing leaders of how to thrive and, you know, lead change in the public service?
I think I've already said it. Be yourself. Be loyal to yourself. Don't be lazy. Make sure that when somebody thinks about you, even if they say, I don't like her face, I don't like his face, they will still say, that person is efficient. I never allowed myself to be described as sloppy or not keeping time or not being prepared for their meeting. No, they are not prepared for this and that. And that you achieve by talking to others and by reading. If you are given something to do, to draft, read the file. Doesn't take that long. Get to know the people who've worked there before. Even if they have retired, talk to them. I was lucky in foreign affairs because we found a lot of people who had been there since independence. And I always sat with them and I was fascinated by their stories. But you must be strong. Don't be aggressive. Just be strong. Don't let anyone think they can just push you up and down. No. There are many ways. You've heard of passive-aggressive. You can resist some things by not saying anything. You just smile. Don't do it. Just smile. And I remember, in fact, one time walking out of, I was going to lunch. So the permanent secretary was with one of our ambassadors, and he said, hey, Sally, I want you to draft this and that and that. I looked at him, and I just walked on. And the other one came to see me in the afternoon to say, what is the matter with you? Why didn't you? So first of all, he said, hey, why are you not responding? The PS said, leave Sally alone. She will do it. I went to lunch thinking, what is that I'm supposed to do? Came into the office. In 5 minutes, I had done it, typed it, and I could type those things myself, because if you go to school in America, you cannot submit any piece of paper to anyone which is not typed. And if you try to pay for typing, you will not afford it. So we had to learn. So I typed it quickly and put it at his desk. So when this ambassador, who later on became my PS a few months after that, came to my office, he said to me, how can you be so casual? I said, you know, Mr. Kiblagat, the PS knows me, but why is he interfering with me when I'm going for lunch? Has he been told that I don't eat lunch? He laughed and he said, do you work like that? I said, yes. Lo and behold, 2 months later, Kiblagat became the PS. And I wondered, what am I going to do here? And Kiblagat was the kind of person who was so correct. As it turned out, we were the only 2 in that ministry at that time from the same county. And I could see he was going to be uncomfortable. I was already uncomfortable. So I quickly asked if I can go on posting to give him space. And it was while I was on posting that he discovered that actually she works very hard. So one day he calls me and he says, you know, you left a gap here. Every file I open, there are things you drafted. I would like you to come to headquarters. I said, but now the kids are in school here. So the way they got me back was to appoint me as the ambassador to UNEP. so that I could still do some work from there. As it turned out, one thing led to another. The ambassador who was in London, your former boss, Ben Kipkulei, got suddenly recalled, and then I'm told, you go there. And the way it happened was so strange. I was told to go, the PSR said we go to State House. When I got there, I always sat behind writing the notes, but now I was an ambassador. Still, I sat at the back because I have never stood on ceremony. Whatever title they give you, don't let it go to your head. Always don't change your personality. Be yourself. I have seen this more recently where people walk around with so much commotion, they think they have to show you they are important. Which reminds me, the minister, the CS I ran into last Friday, must be one of the few people in the public sector who are completely polite and very nice. I didn't know him before. The CS for Education is completely himself. But I've noticed the tendency, especially, I think people who are insecure, they want to show you that they are important. Don't fall into that trap. People will know what you stand for without you are saying it. And if they come in and they don't know you, they don't recognize you, ignore it. It is okay. You can stand up later and go to the person and say, I'm so-and-so, and go back to sit. But if you find that you are having to fight to say, I am Dr. So-and-so, why should I call myself doctor? First of all, I'm not a medical doctor. In the school where I went to, only medical doctors used that title. These days, we distribute the honorary doctorates and we insist on using them. That means you are not confident. You must be confident. You must like yourself enough as you are. This is who I am. So I would say just be confident. It is tough sometimes because you find people who are always in a bad mood. You find your boss in the morning is angry with you. And I remember one PS telling me that she now had a minister who was yelling at her as if she was his wife. I said, don't do anything, just leave him alone. He will know that he's making a mistake. But at some point, you have to let them step back, because bullies also find it easy. If you are being pushed constantly, you agree to go chini, chini, chini. At some point, you have to stand up to them.
Do you miss being in public service?
You remember I was tossed out before my retirement. When I was in OP, I pushed through the cabinet and parliament actually for the civil servants to retire at 60. I wasn't thinking of myself, but I was pushed out on the eve of my 53rd birthday. But again, you have to look at it and say, you know, I came from somewhere. I didn't even want to be a civil servant. I was running away from politics. And I've come here and sleepwalked. I sleepwalked to the top of the civil service. What is it I wanted to do? After I reached there, what more do I want to do? And then I ended up in politics because I was being harassed by CASA. I would never have gone into politics. I can tell you this. But the reason I went there is that once upon a time, coming into the office in London, which is on 45 Portland Street, I was with the Minister for Economic Planning. This time it was Robert Ouko had gone to Economic Planning. And there were some demonstrators against the Polish embassy, which was next to ours. And he asked me, what are those people doing? I said, they are demonstrating. He told me, those few people, tell them to give me money. I will bring them 3 busloads of Luo professional mourners. They will shout this place down. When I was kicked out of the civil service, every so often a green car would come through my gate and they would say, you are wanted in CASA. And I go there, they sit me there for hours asking me nonsense. Why did you do 8 years in primary school? People think you are clever. It was 8 years during my time. Nobody wants to listen to it. So I remembered, 3 busloads of Luo professional mourners, and I joined ODM.
Oh, wow. So practical. And I hope we can actually have many more women getting into the political space. Yeah, we need proper gender representation. Now, as we come closer to the end, I can see the communications team giving me the indication that time is up. But I know maybe one or two people have questions. Okay, as we come closer to the end. Now, if you were to go back to the public service today, is there anything you would do differently?
In the words of Ahmed Sharawi, you would know from your records, I think he was the secretary to the Public Service Commission, and before that we were PSS together. He told me the other day that something is broken. We think, those of us who are there before, feel that the seamless way in which we worked, and at the level of PSS, all the other PSS were your friends, you worked with them. Something seems to have gone astray, and I think we started that drift with the Constitution. So I would like to get it back, improve it, of course, because nothing is forever, for it to deliver, but to definitely have the civil servants know that when they come in on job group, do you still have job group hunger? The job group hunger is the starting position, H. That you can move without favor, you can move according to your work. You are assessed fairly and you move. I can tell you something. I was assessing my staff in London, and I noticed that my deputy was much older than I. And I looked at this guy and I thought, oh, when is he going to get there? He's worked in foreign affairs all these years. When will he be ambassador? So I waited for my bosses to come through there, and I presented that case to the boss through the permanent secretary that I can speak for him because I have to recommend him all the time. It seems to me as if he will never get there. That was Francis Mudaura, because he was my deputy at my request. And then all the other, you should ask him to come and talk to you. I've not read his book, but up to the arrival in OP, that was my work. Because I was so startled that he was that much older. This age I see is not what I saw in the file at that time, that he was so much older, and he kept telling me, I am going to kill you. Why? You are too fast, you are too fast. And I would say, and you, Francis, I want to kill you, you are too slow. I'm just going to kill you. But you see, we could work in that space like that together, and then you see and you say, look, I have moved faster, maybe because I have higher, or maybe I'm faster, or maybe there's some other thing, but it is for me now to actually get the people who work with me, because after he was sent to Brussels at that intervention, my other number two now, who became the number two, was also much older than I. And in the following year, the system sent him to Germany as the ambassador. If you are working with civil servants looking out for each other, because you are not a threat to each other, there is space for all of us. It works. And certainly, I didn't have this problem of being discriminated against as a woman. You know why? I never looked for it. I never thought I was a victim. If somebody came from sideways with some silly thing, I just slashed them to pieces intellectually.
Wow. With a smile. One last question. What would you say is the power or the place of networking? Is networking important as young leaders, as civil servants, as leaders generally?
I believe that networking is important. It has helped me. You know, when let me bring a more recent example. When we fell apart with the post-election violence, some of you will remember that immediately the US government recognized the government in power. So I called somebody from my network and said, this is wrong, don't do that. Within 2 hours it had been changed. It's networks. When we were negotiating, and I've told you, the president of Tanzania was the chairman of the AU. When he came to find out what he could do, he asked me to meet with him because he could trust me, because he had known me all those years. That is network. It is the same president who, one day I'm sitting in the cabinet meeting, and Honorable President of Kenya tells me, Mama, mi nataka uende Tanzania leo. I said, to do what, sir? Oh, they like you there. And the president says he wants you to write a paper for them to get money from the Americans. I said, no, but my counterpart in Tanzania studied agriculture. No, he says you go. You couldn't argue with Kibaki when he got to that. So I went. Got there, I was told the president says you help us. So I did this work. He was doing that because he knew me. We took courses together. He and I and Faris Kuindwa did the same economics classes as undergraduates. Now, even within the Kenyan system, the networks worked for me. When I went to higher education, I wanted to help my primary schools at home, which were mainly mud plastered, and the CDF money had not come out. So I went to Karega Mutahi, who was the PS in education. Karega Mutahi had taught with me at the University of Nairobi. I was the house prefect for his wife in high school. And Professor Ongeri is the one who took me to Dr. Onyonka to give me my one-way ticket to go to graduate school in America. And I've always found that those is long stories, but basically I have always operated with my network. At the political level, when I once was in Brussels in '99 with the power structure here. We had gone to see the commissioner responsible for external affairs. And after we sat down, well, first of all, our ministers wanted the seat, so I thought I'll stay out. Then the boss said, no, came out, come in. Got in, there is no chair. The commissioner says, no, my sister, come here. Gives me a big hug and says to my boss, the president, we don't need this meeting. I can sort out these things with Sally quickly. Because I knew him. He was a minister in the Margaret Thatcher government who worked with me very, very closely, and we maintained the relationship. It was repeated in many countries. Every time we went to those places, and there were people I went to school with, we always got some things done. So I've always found networks, even here at home. The other day when I thought my life was going to come to an end at a place called Sultan Hamud in floods on Saturday. I was looking out of the car, and this rather senior policeman comes and says, oh, boss, uko hapa? I said, and I've stopped asking the police why. The older policemen remember that when I was in OP and we could not increase their salary, I actually worked out a scheme for them to get an allowance. So every time I run into those older policemen, they feel, what can we do for her? So those are contacts, that different type of network. But I've always found networks are extremely important for me. I've actually survived on those because, as I said earlier, I had no uncles or anybody who was anything in this town. I didn't even know any of them. I came from that very tiny background, and it is my school friends or their relatives who have helped me.
Wow, let's appreciate Dr. Sally. So please, never ever underestimate anyone you come into contact with. You just never know. Never ever underestimate anyone. I've seen some hands, but the communications team is saying, time up, time up, time up. I hope we will have some time in future together as you continue to mentor the leaders. So just give us your parting shot. What one thing would you like for us to carry with as we go on in our leadership journeys?
There is no substitute for hard work.
That is a quotable quote, tweetable tweet. Please tweet. There's no substitute for hard work. We have to work hard. Now, are we taking a photo from here or? Okay, but then we have somebody giving a vote of thanks. This has really, really been awesome. It's been better than I thought because, Dr. Sally, you allowed us some time to just get to glean from you and your heart. So I would like to invite Andre to bring whoever is giving a vote of thanks.
It's my absolute honor to give the vote of thanks on behalf of everybody. We are truly grateful that you have reminded us that there is a lot to learn in public service if we choose to learn. And by virtue of all of us applying to this program, we had come here to learn. So we are truly honored that you have reminded us to be confident in ourselves and to be loyal to ourselves, and that we have gotten this chance to hear from your experience in the public service. So I'd like to give you this token of appreciation. Maybe. Yes. Thank you very much. We are truly honored. So I'd like to welcome the fellows to please stand up. We do the 4 factorial clap. So we'll start with 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. So we can start. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1. Thank you, Daktari. We are honored.
I don't live very far from here, so if one day you have a question and answer session, I'll be very happy to step in.
Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Sally.